Hello and welcome to Changing World. My name is Anthony Smith, and today I have a guest with me whose main career has been as a writer and educator. She has a master's degree in adult education and has since been involved in promoting study techniques, specifically in the field of speed reading and speed learning. She is the president of Rev It Up Reading, which is an educational training and speaking business. And some of her books include Success Skills, Strategies for Study and Lifelong Learning, 10 Days to Faster Reading, and The Complete Idiot's Guide to Speed Reading. So I'd like to welcome Abby Marks Beale to the show. How are you, Abby?
I am wonderful, Anthony. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, that's great. Thanks very much for being on the show. So the topic we're going to talk about is, of course, speed reading, which is obviously you're the expert in that. As I say, you've written a number of books and you run webinars. And you have a website which has a lot of information there, which we'll come on to later. So, but first of all, I think it would be a good idea to explain what is considered an average reading speed, as just as a starting point. And obviously, that speed can vary from person to person. So, what would you say is the average reading speed for adults who don't have any of your specialist training?
So I've been teaching speed reading for over 30 years, and I have seen a lot of people over time. And I will say that the average reading speed, at least on the evaluations that are done in my classes, is around 250 words per minute. And it is corroborated by other speed reading experts and other people that track the speed that people do. So it's not just me that figures that out.
No.
And it's most people learn how to read using phonics, meaning you look at the word, you sound it out, you hear it in your head, and then you understand it, and then you move on.
Right.
And the issue with that is that as we become mature readers, that we have a sight vocabulary, meaning we look at a word and we know what it means without having to really, digest it too well. It's just like, oh, I know that word, that we're wasting time because we are sounding it out using technically our mouth or inside of our head, we're hearing it. And then we have to then process it through the ears, and then the brain gets it. So if we can learn how to reduce that, you can't get rid of it, but you can reduce it greatly by almost pretending like you're mute and deaf. I know that sounds cruel, but it's like you want the eyes and brain to be able to connect automatically without that interference that we were trained to do.
Okay.
I hope that makes sense. If anything I say doesn't make sense, just query me. It's okay.
Sure. No. That's fine. So it's a different mindset. It's a different way of being able to look at the words and get them, interface that with the brain and understand it. So that makes sense. I mean, how much faster can a person read by applying these techniques, would you say?
Again, from my experience, there is a bell curve, just like there is in almost everything, where there's some that don't do very well at all because they have an issue with letting go of comprehension temporarily. And then there are some that are amazingly quick and very fast. But I'll just kind of talk about what I like to share with people, which is a concept of a gear shift. Is that if you think of like 5 gears of a car, and I use a hand as an analogy, I'll show it in a class and I'll go, my thumb and my first finger are like gears 1 and 2. Mm-hmm. And those are the gears that most people are stuck in, which are the slower gears.
Right.
Because they don't know how to get into the gears of 3, 4, or 5, which is the middle finger, fourth finger, and pinky finger. And so if we think of the gears, most people don't have that flexibility. And once they learn the flexibility, then they have the ability to go, as slow as they need and as quick as they need based on their skill set.
Right.
So in a lot of my classes, people will go from like 200 words a minute to 450, 500 easily with decent comprehension. And that's only the beginning. And then they learn how to expand their abilities by experimenting and playing and, having fun. It's really fun once you learn these strategies, to go from like 200 words a minute to 800 words or 400 to 1,000, depending on why are you reading it, what do you need it for, and how much background knowledge you have. I mean, if it's something familiar to you, you should be able to get through it fairly quickly. If it's something that's brand new, then of course you're going to slow down some.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That makes sense.
So it's about spearship.
Yeah.
But it's not about thousands of words per minute. I want to just kind of clarify that.
No.
Some people think that reading, thousands of words per minute is the goal, and that is not the goal with speed reading. It's about maximizing a person's ability to double, to triple, but be... So here, Anthony, let me share with you my definition of speed reading. Okay?
Yep.
It's a set of active, mindful, and conscious strategies that allow you to get what you need quickly from any reading material in an efficient and an effective manner.
Right.
So it's not about reading as fast as you can and hoping you remember it or get it.
No.
So that's called speed looking. So that's a different thing.
Right. Yeah. Obviously, the message I'm getting from you is that the most important thing is, if you're going to read faster, you still want the retention of the information, the knowledge.
Yes.
Because if we've all heard of the term skim reading, but when people skim read, the chances are they're going to miss pieces out of the total information that's in there. So obviously the ideal would be to be able to speed up the reading, but at the same time retain all of the information, or as much as possible, within those parameters.
Yes, and I'll add to that skimming for most people, because they haven't learned how to do it differently, is pretty haphazard. They'll jump around, and pick up a piece here, pick up a piece there. But when I share with people this active, mindful strategy of how to, I call it cheat reading or previewing, or just getting like that 10,000 foot view of what is this thing that I'm reading, is that skimming becomes a more prescriptive activity, meaning especially in nonfiction material, things that are factual, which is the harder stuff to read, like a textbook or, articles in magazines and newspapers and things like that they actually have a structure. And once you know that structure, then you go looking for where the meat is, which is, and I'll just tell you, it's a secret, but I'll tell you, it's the first sentence of every paragraph.
Oh.
If you read the first sentence of a paragraph and stop, go to the next first sentence of the next first paragraph and stop, and just follow that, that's going to give you the writer's outline.
Oh,
and if you know that, then you decide how much more of each paragraph do you want. If you're like, I got enough, I don't need to read any more, just go to the next, go to the next, go to the next, and then you found a paragraph that you want and you spend time on it. And so it's an active, mindful, conscious way of approaching reading, which most people they haven't been taught how.
No, I do appreciate that once we've come out of school or college, it's not something that we're really going to actively pursue improving, is it? For most people.
They should.
Well,
they have work, they may develop, they go back to school, they become parents, and parents need to read in order to deal with their children.
That's right. I mean, obviously we do need to keep these skills going, but what I'm saying is I think for a lot of people, they probably just do the minimum. And another thing that has taken over greatly is, of course, images and video. Because now everywhere you look on the internet, we've got video, haven't we? So that's kind of taking the emphasis away from reading and, just looking at visual information. images and moving pictures. So, as I say, this has been another thing which has probably diverted people away from just reading a book per se. Would you say that?
I would say yes. People are tired of reading. They're on their screens all day. So the last thing they want to do is do reading.
Yeah.
And so this is actually, where podcasts are really great. Like people who may be listening to this
Yeah.
are like, I'm learning without reading.
Exactly.
And so reading is just a way to learn, but podcasts are great ways to learn, as are audiobooks.
Yeah.
I think, you can, as long as the person who's reading it isn't boring you to death, and you're getting what you need. It's all about being very selfish. Like, why am I here? What do I need? Am I getting what I need? How do I get what I need? Maybe speed up the recording a little bit so I don't have to wait as long to get through to the end, or who knows what.
Yeah.
But it's not just about physically reading. It's about learning.
Right.
And reading is just like the mother of all study skills, but you can certainly get it from podcasts and ebooks, not ebooks, from audiobooks. So yeah, that's legit, by the way.
Yeah.
I call that reading. I call it reading.
Okay, well, it's the absorbing of information, of course. That's what it is, isn't it? So, can you describe for all the people listening, and especially for people who are not familiar with this, what exactly is involved in speed reading? How do people go about it?
So one is just to be able to know that they need to learn, is to say, okay, just kind of be the student of the world, I think.
Yeah.
There are so many options that people can do. So I have a book called 10 Days to Faster Reading. It's included, I have an online course that it's included in, but I have recorded it as an audiobook. Because there are people like, I don't want to read to learn how to read more. So I said, okay, then if you don't want to read, I'll at least give it to you auditorily, and maybe you'll be able to apply it that way.
Right.
So for those that don't like reading, of which there are a lot, and just as a quick side note, I got into this field because I used to hate to read. When I was in high school, in college especially, I hated reading. I never understood why anybody would want to read a newspaper on a daily basis. Like, wow, what a waste of time. Why would you do that? And so it wasn't until after 4 years of college, getting my degree, that I got turned on to these strategies from a job that I got because I had a degree. And so once I turned on to it, it was like, wow, this is not that hard. Why don't they teach this to people? So then that's when I decided, it was in 1988, I'd created my own company back then.
All right.
To try to, and my own courses, and, and I've developed it completely over the years. Of course, back then we had overhead projectors, no PowerPoint, to do presentations. And, now we've got the PowerPoint, and there's online learning. I mean, it's just a whole different world, but I've kind of pivoted along those lines. But I used to hate to read. And so once that switch flipped, and I saw, wow, this is not really hard. It's just nobody taught me how. I've made a career out of teaching people how. Yeah. Because they need it. We all still need it. You know?
Right. Well, yes, obviously it's a useful skill, and it's also time-saving. In to be able to read things quicker and take information in more quickly. So obviously there are different strategies, but can you just outline a few of the strategies, how they work, and what's your favorite strategy?
There's a lot of them. I think one of my favorite ones, and I share this all the time, is called the white card method. And I think one of the biggest problems readers today have, even more so than when I first started in this career, is attention, their attention span, and the ability to monofocus, to focus on just reading. Because we sit down to read and our brain is like a monkey brain. It goes off into something else, and you're thinking about what you just did or what you have to do. Or the phone goes off and the text goes off and the email's beckoning. I mean, there's just so many things that vie for our attention. Yeah. And so what's important is to learn how to focus in reading. So I do talk about, I add in my training about mindful practices. Just the more that people learn how to narrow their focus to just like, meditation or yoga, Tai Chi, things like that. That helps for reading focus also. But that aside, my favorite strategy is called the white card method. And the white card method is basically taking a blank white card, a blank white piece of paper, the backside of a business card, doesn't matter as long as it's blank and white typically, or just blank and white. And you put it onto, especially, on paper, if you're reading a book or a magazine or a printout or something like that, you would put it on the material. Now, so I'm going to ask you, and I'm going to bait you here. Where would you want to put that white piece of paper or that card on, let's say, a newspaper? Where would you want to put it on the paragraph?
Oh, well, it's hard for me to say, really. I mean, am I guessing that you would just put it just underneath the first sentence of the paragraph?
You are like a million other people I work with. And that's perfect because that's what everybody instinctually thinks. Let's put it under the line that we're reading. Right. And then, it will, show the line that we need to read. And then we move the card down and we see the next line. And this is great for people who are learning how to read, like for kids. Yeah. It's great because you're not daunted by what's coming up and you're leaving exposed what you've already read, which means you can go back over it and double check or triple check and make sure you get it right. But as a mature reader, we don't want that ability to go back. It's called regression. It's not a great reading habit to do all the time. So the card really to work needs to go above that first line. So what you're doing, it's pushing you down and leaving exposed where you're going instead of leaving exposed where you've been. Right.
Now, how
does that make sense?
How does that logically? I mean, it seems kind of contradictory to what obviously my first impression was, which I just gave you. How does that help us? How does it help us to do it that way?
So what it does is it pushes us to move forward. And it resists the temptation to go back. It doesn't mean you can't pick up that card or that paper to look at what you've just read. But for the most part, it helps to keep it moving and your eyes keep moving across the lines appropriately with that card. And it blocks where you've been and leaves open where you're going. Right. I highly recommend you try it. Just, in the beginning, it's a little awkward to have a card or a piece of paper on the top of your material. But as you do it and your eyes focus, it's about focusing on one line at a time. Yeah. You focus on where you're going instead of where you've been.
Right. Okay. So
does that make sense?
Well, I can see what you're saying. It's all about looking ahead rather than looking back to what we've just read. It's all about looking what's coming. Right?
Exactly.
So that's one technique. Are there any other simple techniques that people can experiment with?
There are a lot of techniques. The one that I mentioned earlier about knowing that there is an outline in nonfiction is incredibly powerful because if you have a lot to it. So I'm actually reading a book on it's called the melt theory. It's basically to help with my back. My back's been bothering me. And it's a large book, and all I want to do is learn how to do the process, right? And so the woman who wrote the book, she just explains every detail of why she came up with what she did, how she did it, and I'm like going, okay, that's more detail than I need. Okay, that's my goal is to just find out what I need. And so I'm reading first sentences of paragraphs as I'm going through it, and I'm able to get through her rationale much quicker. I get her rationale without all the details. And then I'm getting to what I need, which is the meat, which is how do I do those exercises? And so it's very helpful so I'm not thwarted in my efforts to get what I need quickly and efficiently.
Yeah.
So it's those first sentences of paragraphs for the most part.
Right.
Sometimes you add the second sentence if the first one didn't give you what you need. Reading the introductory paragraph, reading the conclusion of a chapter. I mean, it's about really being focused on where's that outline. because we daydream. We tend to daydream so much when we read, and daydreaming can be good and it can be not so good. And good daydreaming is like applying what we already know to what we're reading. Like, okay, so you're in England, and I said, yes, I've been to England. And if I'm reading something about England, my background knowledge is churning about my experiences and, the pubs that I went to and the places I visited. And whereas somebody who's never been to the UK would be like, I have no background knowledge to put this to.
No.
So they're not going to daydream as much as someone like me that's already been there and I'm applying it. And it's a good thing to do that.
Yeah.
But what's not good is if I'm reading about something and I'm thinking about, I have to call about those tires for my car. And then, you know what? I need to call my husband about blah, blah, blah. It's where you go off topic.
Exactly. Yes.
That's the difference.
I know I can relate to that myself because, I have noticed sometimes I'll be reading something and my mind is wandering. My mind is just wandering, and it may be because what I'm reading is not captivating enough, or it's just not grabbing me enough. But I have noticed, and I suppose that's quite a common thing, is that people let their minds drift, and sometimes it's hard. You can concentrate for a certain length of time, and then the mind starts to wander, and then you have to bring it back again.
It's not horrible. It's what we do.
Yeah.
It's when you become an expert at mind wandering that we don't want.
No.
No. We want to be able to, grab our attention and pull it back. So here's something you might find interesting is that reading speed can influence how often you daydream. Oh. So think of this, that when we said that 250 words per minute is the average speed that a person reads. The average speed that a person thinks is around 400 words a minute. So if 250 words per minute, your brain is looking for 150 words to fill so that it doesn't have to daydream. So unless you're completely engaged at that 250 words per minute, you're going to daydream some. But the faster you read, over 400 words a minute, the less tendency you have to daydream because the brain is full of what it has to process.
Right.
So that's another reason for speed reading is that it focuses your attention, and you get more done in less time. But it's really about concentration and focus.
Yeah. I can see that. It's rather like the training to achieve the discipline of what you're trying to achieve, because we know that most things, if you practice more, you can improve. And
yes.
It seems to me, from what you've said just now, it's the same with reading. If you try to read quicker, then you're probably going to get better at it, aren't you? Just by practicing.
I would say yes, and you need to have the right strategies, because there are, and you've probably done this, and I did it when I was in college. It's like, I better get through this quickly. So you'd read through it, and you're like, I don't know what I just read. It's like, I went too quick. But when you have strategies like finding the writer's outline before you start, and then I also talk about something called reading keywords, reading phrases, using your hands or a card to read with, and also putting yourself in a concentrating space. Like, you don't want to be laying down, reading something, for work purposes, trying to use your hands or card while you're laying in bed. It's like it doesn't work. You have to set yourself up for success in your environment. Like if your kids are playing and the cat's sitting on your reading material and, there's just so much going on, it's really hard to focus.
Yeah.
So that's why people go to the library. That's why they go to an empty classroom on a campus, is because they need to get all the distraction out so they can really focus. It's about mono. So it's all these different things put into play, but it's not as daunting perhaps as it may sound, because it's like, wow, this is different. Find the writer's outline, use keywords and phrases, use your hands or white card. It's like, but they all make sense. And once you get some success with each one, you're like, I get it. Yeah. And you start to apply it.
Yeah. Well, that's good. So, obviously, you've taught a lot of people these techniques over your career. Let me ask you, what pitfalls do people fall into? What mistakes do people make when they're actually learning to speed read? And how can we obviously avoid making some of the mistakes that people make? And if we're going to learn how to speed read, what is the best way to do it?
Great question. So I think there's a couple of things that are call them pitfalls, but I think anyone that is attempting to learn it is going to make a few mistakes, and that's fine. And the mistakes are really more of a person's own ego, that they're like, I just read this and I don't know what it says because I was reading too fast. But I understand that the eyes and brain have been communicating in a certain way for many years. Depending on how old you are is how many years it's been communicating. And now you're trying to change the conversation. And so it takes a little while, not a long time, but a little while for the eyes and brain to reconnect in a higher level or a faster speed. But the brain is more than capable of taking it in. It's about what the eyes are feeding back to the brain. So one of the things that really, I would say the biggest issue that new novice speed readers come across is their inability or the need to hold on to their ability to understand. And I'm not saying you don't understand, but what I'm saying is it's called unlearning to relearn. You have to kind of get bad at it before you get good at it again. And I use an example, I don't know if you play tennis or pickleball or whatever, but there's different backhands and forehands. And if you get a training from a coach and they show you how to hit that backhand a little bit better, you try it and it's like, that doesn't work. And you try it again and, it's like, okay, I kind of get it, but I don't get it. And after, a couple times of trying that backhand, it's like, oh, I get it now.
Yeah.
And so it's the same thing that happens with reading. Is you start doing it, it's like, wait, this doesn't feel right. My comprehension is just not there, and I don't get it. But if your speed is faster and your comprehension seems to go down, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Because it's a temporary thing. That's how we unlearn to relearn.
Okay.
And so I try to guide people through that. In my online course, Rev It Up Reading, I have 9 modules, and I explain all of this through that, and I explain how people like saying, well, I'm reading faster, but I'm not understanding. I'm like, good for you, because this is how humans learn. And then as you do it, so you're on your own reading material. This is not school. There's no tests. There's no grades. It's about really experimenting with your own humanness and your own ability to be able to do this.
Yeah.
So I tell people that, and I get it fairly frequently. People say, I'm just not improving. What's wrong? And I said, how's your comprehension need? What's your need to understand? And like, oh, I can't not understand. I said, well, you have to let it go temporarily. You have to, in order to get to that higher level.
Right. So, okay, so it's kind of a stepping stone in a way, you're saying. And at what point do people notice an improvement in terms of their comprehension?
Depends on where they started.
Yeah. So
in my classes, I usually do a quick reading with some questions. And so let's say they started that reading with, 80% comprehension, right? Yeah. So that means that they understood. So when they start to read faster, they may drop to maybe 50 or 60%. Maybe not. Maybe they go up to 90 because now they're more focused as they go. So everybody's, a little bit different. But the speed part, the comprehension part really is based on how good you understand to begin with. I have people who come into this class because it is an English-based class who have English as a second language, and rightfully so. Their background knowledge may not be as strong as an English speaker's.
No.
And so when they come in, maybe they come in at 60% or 70%. So their biggest issue is their lack of vocabulary. So no matter what we do, unless they build their vocabulary, it's not going to help. But so let's say they come in at 70%, you want their speed to go up and keep 70%. Make sense?
Oh, yeah.
I hope.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So obviously, I mean, based on what you've just said, then, does it follow that someone who is naturally kind of, let's say, a very academic, very studious person who reads a lot of books, they're already kind of above average in being able to read information and take in information. And do you find that if that sort of person, if they become a speed reader, they do much better than average, would you say?
Sounds like they're already doing better than average.
Yeah.
They're already, reading a lot. So certainly, yes.
Yeah.
I can also say that people who read a lot and they're interested in reading and they're always doing some kind of reading, typically have better beginning speeds than others that don't, because for whatever reason, reading is a satisfying experience for them. People that tend to read slowly don't tend to read because reading is not a satisfying experience. And so their attitude towards reading is more negative, whereas those that read a little more often or more often have a more positive, tend to more positive. And I address that in all my courses and materials, because if you don't have a good attitude, like I hated reading, it was negative, then I didn't want to read. But once I was turned on and I saw, wow, I see how reading can be a satisfying experience, then I started to read a lot more. So it's about changing that attitude through a series of successes and skills.
Yeah.
What I can also say is that a lot of people don't know what their reading speed is, but they have this self-perception that they're the slowest reader in the world. And then when they test their reading speed, they're like, I didn't realize I wasn't that slow, or I'm faster than I thought I was. And that alone, that little nugget right there is incredibly helpful. And so I have on my website a speed reading test that anybody can take online to just give you that quick piece of knowledge. So I encourage people to do that at revitupreading.com, to go test their reading speed, to just say, where do they fall, at least in this little quick thing.
Yeah. Well, that's a great idea, and we'll actually put a link underneath the video that people can click on and get onto your website. Yes, so that should make it easy for people to obviously find the information there. Yeah. So, I mean, there aren't that many speed reading courses widely available, are there? I mean, tell me, what is it about your speed reading course that is really going to be helpful to people and is going to make them want to go on the course?
Sure. So I certainly know who the quote unquote competition is, although I'm pretty friendly with some of my competition because we're all in this little niche together. All right. I would say that my course is very, very prescriptive and educational in that it's not just practicing. I mean, there are 17 timed exercises and people experiment with their strategy, but it's the education. It's almost like if we were in a classroom together, this is how it would be taught. It would build one upon the other upon the other. It's not just like here's, which I do like, by the way, like a company named Spreeder that they have, or Spritz Inc. They have, where they force feed the reading to you, and so your eyes and brain have to learn how to communicate really well, which is great. But that doesn't tell you what to do on your own material. It doesn't give you the mindful active strategies that I talk about. So I give people the tools to work with, and then they can go over to Spreeder and they can go over to Spritz, and it'll be practice mechanisms. So it's a course. It's how to do it.
Yeah. And so I mean, the course, is it divided into modules, or how?
Yes.
So how long generally does it take people to get through the course, would you say?
So I've cut it down over the years to make it as short as I can and as efficient as I can. So there are a total of 9 modules. Each module takes maybe 20 minutes, depending on how fast you read, 30 minutes, 30, 20 minutes. Yep. So the total would be about 5 hours. But nobody should be doing this from, at 10 in the morning until 3 in the afternoon. You might blow your head off because there's just so much information. But I tell people, go to take 2 modules at a time. then experiment on your own materials, on screen, on paper, play with it a little bit, and then come back and then do another module or two. It's kind of like drip. Take a little bit at a time, because that's how we learn, is through repetition over time.
Right. Yeah.
So some people do. I have a 7-day access, meaning people get these 9 modules for just 7 days. These are usually college students, like right before they go back after break or right before college starts. They're like, oh my gosh, I got to tune up my skills. And so in 7 days, they're doing their best to finish those 5 hours, which is good, better than nothing, but it's better when it's a little bit more time.
I see. Yeah.
You want to digest it. And
yeah, like most things, because the mind, of course, when we sleep, the mind is processing information, and then the next day, obviously, that has kind of gone into the mind, been absorbed a bit better. So yeah, I can certainly see the value of kind of spreading it out and not trying to cram in everything into, such a short period of time. Like most things, most courses are like that. If you've got more time to learn it, then so much the better.
Right.
So I think we've covered a lot of this. I mean, is there anything else you'd like to explain, just generally to people listening, and anything that might inspire them, or anything that might help them along in some way? What would you say?
Well, I can say that because I hated to read. It's not like I was born a speed reader. It is something that can be learned. It is definitely something. It's not a. It's more natural now. I've been doing it for over 30 years, but it's always going to be a active, mindful, and conscious thing. When you sit down to read, you have to be thinking about what you're doing and how you're doing it. It's not just, oh, I'm going to read right now, and you pick up something and you just read from beginning to end. There has to be a strategy involved every time. And so it's just about really being intentional about what you're doing, which most of us don't do. We're like, oh, I have to read this, but there's no structure around it.
No.
So you get into, and I still do that. Do I want to read this laying on a couch? Do I want to read this sitting up at a desk or table? Do I need a highlighter? There's all different, in the head is like, what am I doing here? This is work. Reading is work, no matter what you say, unless it's a novel on the beach, that's a different story. But I'd love to just share, if it's okay with you, Anthony, that that Complete Idiot's Guide to Speed Reading book has gone out of print, but I secured the ebook rights. And because I have the ebook rights, I had to rename it. So I have created it in an ebook, I've updated it, and it's coming out March 1st in 2022. And it's called Speed Reading, a little known time-saving superpower.
Right.
It's going to be the name of the book. So I just wanted people to know that it's coming out. It's an ebook. It should be available on most platforms, and I highly recommend that you secure a copy so you can learn from it.
Right. And is that available from your website, or is it you have to go to other platforms to find that?
It should be on all platforms. I'm in the process of working with an ebook distributor on that. So it should be, let's just say if it's not available for sale on my website, there will be a link to where you can get it.
All right, so that's fine. Yeah. Well, that's very, very helpful for everybody listening, I think. And obviously, I'm assuming that most of the people listening will not have necessarily experimented with speed reading, and it might be something that they might want to investigate.
I hope so. For their sake, it's fine.
Yeah. I mean, it's the sort of thing where you've got nothing to lose. Either your reading will stay the same, or you might put a bit of effort in, and your reading might improve, and you might get faster. But obviously, nothing ventured, nothing gained, is what we say.
Yeah.
So that's great, Abby. Well, anyway, I'd like to say thank you very much for coming on the show and sharing some of your knowledge there. And I hope that's been helpful to people listening. And as I said before, it may be something they want to follow up or investigate at some stage. So once again, thanks very much, Abby.
Thank you, Anthony.
All the best.
Thank you. To you too.
So I'd just like to say thanks to everybody for listening, and we'll speak to you next time. Thank you.